this story about Dominic Cummings on their front page. There's the Independent just put in front of me. Now Cummings attacks PM over leak accusations. And it's that central accusation from Cummings that obviously is the line we need to talk about. Ex-advisor says Johnson is lacking in competence and integrity.
Well, I think that we've all seen Boris Johnson in action, and I think these attacks from Cummings on him are really not having any impact. I actually, maybe you get cynical as you get older, but it looks and smells like a distraction from the reality of. Do you agree with me? It's far more serious that a man, an ex-prime minister of our country, was for his own benefit and gain. And I take issue with the expert you had on about lobbying, who insulted most of the MPs by saying they're not in touch with their portfolio. Well, that's why the Cummings of this world are in existence. If an MP wants advice, he should go and he shouldn't go to a lobbyist with vested interest. He should go and seek it from experts.
Ian, thanks for your call tonight. I'll leave it there. Rue next. Hello, Rue.
Hi there, Stephen.
Evening.
Good evening. I completely agree with Ian. Although the papers today have all followed this story because Dominic Cummings has responded to all this. It started in the Telegraph, the Times, and the Sun, and basically there was so much else going on with British politics. The Tories decided to throw that out there. So now he's had to respond to that. He's been out of the public eye for so long, and now he has to respond to these allegations.
I don't really know. What's the point you're making?
He's going to take revenge on the party that's having a go at him, and I think it's all disingenuous. It's taking all the eyes away from what's really going on with the government right now.
Which is what?
Basically, they're ignoring human rights. Oh God, they're doing so much wrong. Where does one start, really, Stephen? They are trying to obfuscate the mess they have turned this nation into.
Are you not interested in the allegations Cummings is making against his former boss, the Prime Minister? Or do you think Cummings is so diminished, your opinion of him is so diminished that you don't believe a word he says, or what is it?
Stephen, I'm sure he has some dirt, which is why it was so hard for them to actually go, you did something wrong, and if we chastise you, I forget which Scottish parliamentarian that messed with the COVID laws and had to leave, you know. But that didn't happen with the English, not even a civil servant. It was Dominic Cummings, just a helper or what have you for the government. But the same rules should have applied, and it affected how the British populace treated coronavirus, and it probably contributed to some of the death.
Ruth, thank you very much indeed. Let me give you a sense of how some of the papers are covering this story tomorrow. Independent, the Prime Minister has been accused of lacking competence and integrity by his former chief advisor Dominic Cummings, who this week was himself accused of leaking by Number 10, something that Dominic Cummings, of course, vehemently denies. That's the Independent. Let's just go through some of these newspapers with you. Let's see what The Guardian, how they're describing the story. They're saying it's an astonishing attack on the Prime Minister. Dominic Cummings has launched an unprecedented and extraordinary attack on Boris Johnson, says The Guardian, alleging that the Prime Minister tried to quash a leak inquiry as it implicated an ally and hatched a possibly illegal plan for donors to pay to renovate his flat. Number 10 is denying that. These are the allegations, though, being made by the man who Boris Johnson trusted with everything he was doing within Number 10. That trust clearly completely obliterated now. We're going to speak to Peter O'Born in just a couple of minutes' time. We're going to continue to take your calls tonight. This is what 5 Live at the weekend is all about this time of the night. We have a big news story. It's just starting to break, and you can pick up the phone to us and be among the first to be talking about it across the UK. 08085 909 693. We'll pick up this story straight away after the 11 o'clock news.
The voice of the UK. This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
BBC News at 11 o'clock. This is Victoria Bourne. Dominic Cummings has launched a blistering attack on his old boss, Boris Johnson, questioning his competence and integrity. The former top advisor denied leaking text messages sent between Mr Johnson and the businessman Sir James Dyson. In the exchange last March, Mr Johnson promised to fix concerns Sir James had over his employees' tax bills if they moved to the UK to make ventilators. Former sub-postmasters who've won a legal fight to clear their names have said the fight for justice against the Post Office and its use of a faulty IT system will continue. 39 men and women had their convictions for theft, fraud and false accounting overturned by the Court of Appeal. The Conservative MP, Lucy Allen, who was a member of the all-party parliamentary group on post offices, said all those responsible for this travesty must be brought to justice.
It's not just within the Post Office, it's within Fujitsu, the Horizon software provider, and I am concerned about people within the civil service who may well have known about this as well, because obviously the government wholly owned the Post Office. So a judge-led inquiry would enable that to happen.
The Wales manager Ryan Giggs has been charged with assaulting 2 women at his home in Salford last November. He's also accused of coercive or controlling behaviour. The former Manchester United player said he would plead not guilty. 6 Extinction Rebellion protesters have been cleared of causing criminal damage to Shell's London HQ, despite the judge directing the jury that they had no defence in law. The activists told the court they targeted the oil giant because it was directly contributing to climate change. After the trial at Southwark Crown Court, one of the protesters, Selling Clifford, said they'd argue to the jury that what they did was necessary.
I think they were convinced that we had acted with justification. The action we took was proportional to the massive threat that we are facing and that is not being addressed by our governments.
The reality TV star and transgender activist Caitlyn Jenner has said she intends to run for governor of the US state of California. The state's current Democratic governor faces a recall bid over his handling of the pandemic. Sophie Long reports.
In a statement posted on social media, Caitlyn Jenner, who's step-parent to the famous reality TV Kardashian clan, said, "I'm in. California is worth fighting for." She's hoping to unseat Governor Gavin Newsom, who is facing a recall bid launched last June over charges he mishandled the state's response to the coronavirus pandemic. Republicans see the potential recall election as their first chance to win a statewide contest in California since the 2006 re-election victory by action hero Arnold Schwarzenegger.
And zoologists at the University of Exeter are looking for a remote spot in either England or Wales to be the base for the reintroduction of British wildcats. The extremely shy creatures have been extinct in most of the UK for 200 years. BBC News, it's 3 minutes past 11.
5 Live Breakfast.
I definitely want to hear more from the 1974 Eurovision judge, Basil.
Not just you, in fact. Elaine says, we demand more Basil. Best guest ever, get him back. Basil is brilliant. Get him on every day. Give him a 23-year contract, says Matt in Essex.
That's 23-year contract. The guest of the week.
Cliff nearly won the Eurovision Song Contest in 1968 because...
You're going to say General Franco, aren't you?
Oh, you're there before me.
The politics of Eurovision, extraordinary. The referendum in Italy to legalise divorce, Salazar, the military coup, Franco, what the stuff. But behind the scenes, the geopolitical shenanigans behind Eurovision.
5 Live Breakfast. Back Monday morning from 6. Listen on BBC Sounds. Stephen Nolan on BBC Radio 5 Live.
Cummings hits back with astonishing attack on Prime Minister. That's how The Guardian is describing it. The Times says it's war. Cummings declares war on, quote, unethical, foolish Prime Minister and questions his competence and integrity. The former top advisor, Dominic Cummings, denied leaking text messages sent between Mr Johnson and the businessman Sir James Dyson. Lots of you have been calling us about this tonight.
I'll tell you what the irony is. It's that it takes Dominic Cummings, who was at the heart of what seems to be a lying culture within the government. But why hasn't anybody in the cabinet whistle-blown?
You know, this is history. This has happened for hundreds of years. One person doesn't like another in power. Let's just move on. I'm with Boris. There's more important things to concentrate on.
The Daily Mail, Dom's all-out war with Prime Minister. The Daily Telegraph, war on Prime Minister. Let's hear what you have to say about this breaking story tonight. Here's how to get in touch.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live. Call free 08085 909 693. Text 85058. Text will be charged at your standard message rate. Plus, see our privacy notice. bbc.co.uk/5 Live. Stephen Nolan on BBC Radio 5 Live.
We'll get the thoughts of the journalist Peter O'Born in just a second or two. First, let's get our Paul Core, Greg Dawson, to set out the story.
Well, on Tuesday, Stephen, the BBC reported a series of text exchanges between the Prime Minister and Sir James Dyson. Now, that was regarding UK tax policy of whether James Dyson's employees would be affected if they left Singapore to work in the UK to produce ventilators. Now, this morning's papers were full of hints from unofficial sources within Downing Street that Dominic Cummings was behind that leak. However, he has released a statement that is about so much more than just leaked text messages. It's an explosive intervention from a man that Boris Johnson used to count on as one of his most trusted allies. He obviously denies having anything to do with the leak of those text messages to the BBC. He says he's willing to hand over his phone to the Cabinet Secretary for it to be inspected to prove the point. But he goes so much further. He not only denies that leak, he talks about one last November. Now, cast your mind back. This was actually in the end of October last year regarding a second national lockdown for November in England. Now, Dominic Cummings says that information was leaked, but he was cleared personally of being behind it. But he says that the Prime Minister was considering not having an inquiry into who the leaker was because one of the potential suspects was a close friend of his partner, Carrie Simons. Now, a senior government official says those allegations are completely false, while Downing Street say the Prime Minister has never interfered in any government leak inquiry. But there's even more. He talks about the renovation to the Downing Street flat. There's been reports for months that the Prime Minister's partner, Carrie Simons, wasn't happy with the decor in the flat above number 11 where she resides with the Prime Minister, that she got an interior designer in to revamp it. Mr Cummings has accused the Prime Minister of planning to get donors to secretly pay for the renovations, claiming he warned him that it was unethical and possibly illegal. Now, we've got a statement from Downing Street on that point too. They say that government and ministers have acted in accordance with appropriate codes of conduct and electoral law, and that all gifts and benefits would be declared transparently at a later point. Now, earlier today, the government did say that the costs of the wider refurbishment have been met by the Prime Minister personally.
Let's speak to the journalist Peter O'Born. Evening to you, Peter.
Good evening.
Peter, Dominic Cummings has so little to lose compared to the Prime Minister. Why would Boris Johnson be picking a fight with him?
With great respect, Mr. Nolan, I greatly admire you, but this isn't about some sort of petty feud between two men in power. It's about ethics, it's about potential corruption, it's about cronyism, it's about morality in government. So ask me the correct question and I'll answer it.
I like your style, Peter. I do like your style. But I stand over the question, right, as to this is also, is it not, about Boris Johnson does not and did not at the moment have a big political scandal in front of him. Does he now, Peter? Because these are specific allegations
this is a good question.
From Cummings.
As I explained in my book, Assault on Truth, published 2 months ago, there is a massive issue of Boris Johnson and integrity, and that issue has been almost totally ignored by the mainstream press in this country, and I'm afraid I would include the BBC in that. But what has been bubbling up on under the surface a series of very serious sleaze issues concerning the governance of this country by Prime Minister Johnson. One of them, and in that excellent summary by your political correspondent, some of those, not all of them, were dealt with. One of them is the renovation of the Downing Street flat, where reportedly sums of money up to £200,000 were spent. And Mr. Johnson found himself very severely out of pocket. And reportedly, they went to private donors, businessmen, or sort of rich people, to sort him out and didn't declare it. And then there was a row in Tory central office, eventually Mr. Johnson's been obliged to declare it himself. But the big businessmen have paid money. It's called Brownlow, I believe. He paid money to Tory fund, and the Tory party paid. No, this has been reported in the Daily Mail. I'm just telling you. I don't know. I'm not saying whether it's true or not. That is
exactly, and we have no evidence that it is true, and I'm sure Mr. Brown
the Daily Mail
would deny it.
No, but this is the point. This has not been followed up on the BBC, which doesn't like to touch scandals of this nature. It's been largely, but not totally ignored by other papers. But it obviously rattled Downing Street. Now, and the second one was the Dyson one, where your Lorna Koonsberg did really well. 3 cheers for Lorna. She revealed these text messages suggesting, I'm not saying it improved, didn't, suggesting an improper relationship between the Prime Minister and this very senior businessman. Now, I think what happened was, you're quite right, there wasn't a big noise about it, but it rattled Downing Street. Now, I think, this is my theory now for you, that they thought more was to come. And they thought it was coming as a revenge message from Cummings. And so last night, the 3 crony newspapers, the 3 pro-Downing Street papers, all of them simultaneously put out the Times newspaper, the Sun newspaper, and the Telegraph newspaper, the 3 papers which your listeners ought to know, the ones which are most likely to put out the Downing Street line. They were briefed by an anonymous Downing Street spokesman that Dominic Cummings was leaking material against Boris Johnson. Now, and that was actually implicitly an attack also on your own Lorna Koonsberg, because Laura, I apologise, Laura Koonsberg, because she was the person who was passing some of this information on. And so they were saying that, and I think this was and there was all kinds of, why did Downing Street do this? Why do they declare war on Dominic Cummings and threw Cummings on the BBC? People should know that. And why were they doing it? Now, I think they believed there was much more to come. That Cummings had a whole series of bombs which he was about to explode, and they thought best to get him out there in the open. So they fair war. And then, of course, and it was a big gamble. I wouldn't have done it. I thought, crikey, what on earth are they doing? And then Cummings has come back tonight with his own statement, making massive allegations about the personal integrity of the British Prime Minister. This is huge.
And Boris Johnson will know what Cummings knows, because every, as you well know, Peter, every dangerous story that there was, it was Cummings, the mastermind behind how the government was handling it. So he knows where the skeletons are, and Boris knows where his are. So is this a game of brinkmanship now between the two or not?
I think that, look, again, this is purely my own speculation. We're looking at individual motive. I'm guessing that Cummings wants to destroy Johnson, and he thinks it's the material to do so. He's making very serious allegations tonight about the Prime Minister's, and about the he blocked a threatened to block a leak inquiry in connection with COVID, which may have caused, may have led a leak, which may have led to death. So we don't know. Very serious allegations. Then we got these. He's saying that he said that his Downing Street renovations, which were incredibly expensive, were wrong and unethical. And Cummings is a man who worked extremely closely with the British Prime Minister for a year or more. It was hard. Against my advice, by the way, it was astonishing to me that somebody of the moral calibre of Cummings should have been brought into the heart of the British government, but he was. He was hired in July, I think, August 2019. He stayed until late last year. Now, he's worked very closely with the Prime Minister. He knows what the Prime Minister's like, and he does possess a lot of documents, I believe, which are to do with the way Mr. Johnson has chosen to conduct himself as Prime Minister.
And the point, Peter, that I think that you are making within this, that I'm also wanting to talk about, is that these are very specific allegations against the Prime Minister. So it's not just a broad statement that is at the end of Dominic Cummings' blog about a lack of integrity, but because there are specific allegations within this, then those specific allegations could be investigated. The opposition parties, the others, might be zoning in on that. And how dangerous is that for Boris Johnson?
Look, I think actually we need now to go to the basic core of this. Has there been misconduct by the Prime Minister involving money and involving his handling of the COVID crisis? These are the two great issues. And we need to know, we must know the answer to this, because you can't, the personal finances of the British Prime Minister inside 10 Downing Street are a matter of enormous concern, and they should be full in the public domain. Likewise, Mr. Johnson's handling of COVID. This is a terrible pandemic which has killed more than 100,000 British people and has had enormous consequences for all of us. Is there something improper and unethical about his handling of COVID? Now, those are two huge issues. Now, some people might, I think what Downing Street was trying to do last night was saying is that there's coming from this embittered person, Cummings. Forget about all of that. We need to know the truth now of whether Mr. Johnson has been ethical, honourable and legal in the way he's run this country and Downing Street.
Peter, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, sir. Always nice to talk to you. There have been a number of statements from 10 Downing Street about these stories. In terms of the refurbishment of the flat, they say at all times the government and ministers have acted in accordance with the appropriate codes of conduct and electoral law. Cabinet Office officials have been engaged and informed throughout. and official advice has been followed. All reportable donations are transparently declared and published, either by the Electoral Commission or the House of Commons Registrar, in line with the requirements set out in electoral law. Gifts and benefits received in a ministerial capacity are and will continue to be declared in transparency returns. On the inquiry, the Downing Street spokesperson has said the Prime Minister has never interfered in a government leak inquiry. 08085 909 693 is the number to call tonight. 08085 909 693. That's Peter O'Byrne's views. Let's get yours tonight as well. We'll move on to another story. 39 former postmasters have had their names cleared after the UK's most widespread miscarriage of justice. They were convicted of stealing money. Some were imprisoned after a flawed computer system was installed in post office branches. Kevin Peachy, the BBC's personal finance correspondent, has been following this story. Hello to you, Kevin.
Hello, Stephen.
You've actually been following this story for years, haven't you? How did this happen?
Well, a computer system installed at the post office branches from 1999 called Horizon, and it showed up various shortfalls in branch accounts. And for 14 years, the post office investigated and prosecuted people based on the evidence from that Horizon system. They were prosecutions for theft, fraud, false accounting, and as you say, people lost their homes, their livelihoods. Some went to prison. Many had to move out of their community because of perceived shame for it. But more than 700 of those prosecutions were based on evidence from this computer system. People thought they were alone when they were investigated, and they weren't alone because there were so many of them, and today they weren't alone again because 39 of them had their convictions quashed in a stroke. That's the most widespread miscarriage of justice exposed in the UK.
I'm struggling to understand how a flaw in a computer system, which then was affecting many of these people, was not identified a lot earlier on.
Absolutely. Well, and it took years. It took years of campaigning.
How did it take years? How?
Yeah. Well, through the courts, years of campaigning. As I say, people initially didn't know others were affected, and then it took years for them to take their case. They realised there was a problem. They took their cases through the civil courts before a judge ruled that the system had bugs and defects. Some of those shortfalls of many thousands of pounds were simply a fault of the system, and the post office fought tooth and nail to say that these prosecutions were okay at the outset. What the today's ruling, which was particularly damning, really, of the post office said, was that the post office steamrolled over these sub-postmasters and postmistresses when they tried to question the robustness, if you like, of that system. They fought for many years to say that this system was robust, but they knew that there was a problem with this system, and only now, really, the people are starting to see their names cleared.
And what, Kevin, was this system doing? These flaws, what was it doing? Was it churning out wrong numbers, or what was it actually doing?
Yeah, quite simply, it was showing shortfalls in these branch accounts. So at the end of the day, they were looking at these accounts, and they were showing that there wasn't enough money in the till, if you like. And as a result of that, many of these sub-postmasters, sub-postmistresses, who of course are it's like they run a franchise. They run and manage these post offices, often in small communities. They realised that the system was showing a shortfall. Many phoned up the post office and said, "Look, I think there's a problem here." In some cases, that led to that was followed by investigations. But in order to plug that shortfall, many of them either sold their homes or remortgaged their homes. Look, they found money from their own savings in order to plug those shortfalls. Now, even now, with the post office saying it will right the wrongs of the past and it will organise for compensation to be paid, it's also said that it will pay back these shortfalls that people have used their own money to pay, and they've had 2,400 claims for that. And it says, the post office says, it may not be able to afford all that money, and it may have to go cap in hand to the government to pay for it.
I'm sorry, but there is a basic part of this story I still don't understand, and I need to, before we move on, to talk to some of the people who have actually been affected by this, Kevin. So see if you can help me. So I get it that this flawed system was churning out a result that showed that there wasn't enough money, as you put it, in the till. So there should have been an amount of money collected. That money was not collected. But how did that result in an accusation of fraud? Because to get to that stage for a prosecution, you don't just have to show the money missing. You have to show, surely, the person who you're prosecuting has taken it with intent. How did they do that?
There is the key to this story, really, that those shortfalls were shown in the system. The post office said the system was robust. There was no problem with the system, they said. The problem must be with the individuals. But the key to this was the post office was both investigator and prosecutor. It brought these prosecutions to the court. It put before the court the evidence, which it said this robust system says there are shortfalls. There's no other possible explanation that these people stole the money or there was false accounting here, and people were brought before the courts, people who were upstanding members of their community, and they ended up being prosecuted for it. And for years they've had to live with that. More than a decade, many of these have been fighting to clear their names. And
final question, Kevin, has anybody at the post office resigned because of this?
There's been nobody who's had sort of personally accountable for this. The post office has apologised. It's had a statement today. Post office chiefs, sort of past and present, saying there was a deep pain involved, that compensation will be paid to right the wrongs of the past as swiftly as possible. They're cooperating with there is an inquiry going on with which is a government commissioned inquiry at the moment. Now, many of the sub postmasters say that inquiry actually hasn't got enough teeth, that it didn't have the power to summon and question people, cross-examine them. But there is an inquiry going on, and that will report in the summer. The post office saying these are historical failings which it apologises for, and it is working to compensate people for.
Kevin, thank you very much indeed. Mohammed Rasool was a sub-postmaster in Salford. Good evening to you, Mohammed.
Good evening.
You had your conviction quashed today.
Yes, after 16 years.
That must be a massive weight off your shoulders, sir.
I can't put it in words, the elation and the relief that I feel even now at well past 11 o'clock in the evening. I'm still digesting and still trying to come to a realization that this has actually happened.
What has it felt like, having that accusation hanging over your head for over 15 years?
Oh, my God. Where do I start? When initially it happened, it was very clinical. The auditors came along with the area manager and immediately said, lock the front door, you're not opening up this morning. When I asked what was the problem, we'll find out. And then it was a case of, you're suspended. They interviewed me in my kitchen because I lived at the property that I was running as a post office. Interviewed me in the kitchen and quite blankly said, you are now suspended. You cannot open the shop or the post office. I said, post office is your responsibility. You have authority over it. You can stop that, but you can't stop me opening the shop. I fought tooth and nail to try and convince them that it wasn't me. When I had the problems, I contacted Helpline to no avail. And it was just an uphill struggle all the time.
How much money were they alleging, Mohammed, you had stolen?
In my case, it was £14,118.79. After 16 years, I can remember exact figure.
No, I'm sure you can, sir. But the bit, as I was saying to our correspondent, Mohammed, that
yes.
I still cannot understand is surely for anybody to be prosecuted in this country, they would need to actually show more than the money was missing. They would have to show your involvement. They would have to be able to prove your action before prosecuting you. So how did they get to a point of conviction without being able to actually show you having the money?
Well, they did all the investigation that they could to find the money. They investigated my accounts, my spending, everything. And they couldn't find any place where the money could or should have gone.
So you're making my point for me. So there was no trace of their money in your account. So how did you get convicted? That's the story for me.
Because they were convinced that the Horizon system was robust as and when it first happened to me, I said, look, it must be the computer system. And one of the retorts that I got off my area manager was that there's 16,000 other sub-post offices. They don't have any problems. How come it's just your office that has the problem? Even at that time,
that wasn't true.
Of course it wasn't true. But then I was convinced by their statements and by their allegations that I was the only one that was suffering. It's only much later on that I found out that there was so many of us affected.
How do you tell your children and your wife that you're being accused of being a thief? And all that comes with it, after you're convicted, how do you face your family when actually you are then portrayed as someone that have jeopardised their future for your greed? None of it true, but how do you cope with that in front of your family, and what do you say to them?
Well, obviously, I had to convince my family, and fortunately, my family had every trust in me, because they couldn't obviously see any place where I could have put the money. I wasn't a gambler, I wasn't a drinker, there was nothing that could have accounted for the money. So my family, God bless them, they were all very concerned and very supportive of me. It's because of their support that I managed to keep the private side running, even when the post office appointed postmistress ran the office for nearly 6-7 years, and I kept the shop going.
So you had to watch as the post office you ran was being run right beside you by somebody else?
Exactly. And the arrangement that they'd made with me was pay a pittance in rent for the post office side.
Did you lose many friends?
Most of my friends didn't know, because it's something that you naturally try and hide, and because it happened for such a long time, there were times when I actually started doubting myself, that I know I haven't taken the money, but I must have done something wrong that had made the money disappear wherever it's gone. And that was the hardest bit to face.
After the court case, what were you convicted of?
I was convicted of theft of £14,000 plus.
And you were then tagged?
I was tagged, oh God. I was tagged for, I can't remember the length of period. I think it was about 6 months or something. And whilst I was tagged, my father, I got a call in fact it was the day before Valentine's, in the morning, about 3-4 o'clock in the morning. My mother rang me and said that my dad was very poorly. I needed to go and see him. I was in Salford, my dad was in Blackburn, and I started frantically ringing around trying to find somebody that I could talk to, so that I'd be given the opportunity to go and see my dying father whilst the tag was on, because the conditions of the tag was that if I, after a certain time, I think it was 11 o'clock at night till 8 in the morning, if I left my house, they would automatically lock me up, no questions asked.
My goodness. So you couldn't go and be with your dad?
I just could not. And in the end, I was that devastated because I had found out that he was on his deathbed. That I think spoke to one of the parole officers, and he said, "Look, just cut the tag off, leave it at home. It'll still show that you're there." And he gave me his name and number and said that if anything comes of it, I'll vouch for you. God bless him. After 16 years, I honestly can't really remember that, but it was harrowing, to say the least.
You know, I think for those of us listening to your story and that of the others who were so terribly treated, it is scary, it is terrifying that so many innocent people can be convicted because of a computer software flaw. We expect a flaw like that to be interrogated and exposed in a court process. Of course we do. We expect that no innocent people can be convicted in the numbers who were because of a flaw in a computer software program. That's what is terrifying about this.
But the thing is, Stephen, that they didn't share that information with the sub-postmasters that were directly affected, let alone anybody else outside the system. They kept us in the dark at all times. I was talking to some of my colleagues today, and they were saying that they were told that they were the only ones that were having the problems. So it was well orchestrated by the management of the post office.
And is there going to be any accountability? Where?
I wish.
Yeah,
I wish there could be. Honestly, they are apologising. The apologies. My heart goes out to 3 of the people that have been had their convictions quashed, who have sadly died, or even committed suicide because of the shame of it all. I myself have saved myself from that fate because of my faith and my religion and the support that I got from my family and friends.
Were you ever tempted?
There were times.
The media clearly has a job to do here, and it is an obvious job, as do political representatives, as do others. When those within the post office structure saw that there was a pattern of many, many people being accused of the same thing, why did they say this was only happening to individuals? Why did they do that? That is a key question. When they then saw that pattern, were they not required to look at the possibility that there was a problem with the software? And now that it's been proven that there was, who is being held accountable within the post office? Are words enough? Are any of those people still working for the post office? And where are those people working? Who did that to people like you? If they're not in the post office, where are they? How sorry are they?
I don't honestly know what their fate is, and as my God is my judge, they will have to face justice, whether it's on this earth or in the hereafter. But majority of the people, and this is the part that hurts me the most, because I used to work for the post office. I've worked nearly 20 years in the post office. Started as a postman, worked my way through to working at the cash centres, what they called REM units or remittance units, and I knew almost every one of the people that turned against me. I was working in the cash centres at sometimes with £1 million plus around me that I was sending out to the sub-post offices, and there was nothing happening. Nothing happened then. But as soon as I have a post office of my own and they put the Horizon system in, this started happening. And it's the people
I'm just thinking about you. I'm
sorry.
No, sorry to cut across you, Mohammed.
No.
I'm just thinking about you. For example, late at night, and you're going to bed, and you're lying there. An innocent man convicted of theft, all that comes with it, the stigma, the community thinking of you differently now, all of that comes with you. And you're lying there alone, wondering how you're going to get out of this. I'm not supposed to get angry at stories like this, because I'm presenting a program, but I am angry. And I'm frightened that this could happen to other people within our justice system. And I want to know why the checks and balances were not there.
It's the thing is that the justice system is good. There's no doubt about it, because of the justice system, we are where we are. It's the individuals and the corporate management of the post office that's
How long did your
fault.
conviction stand?
16 years.
And you're telling me the justice system is good? This country, our justice system described you as a criminal, as a thief for 16 years?
Yeah, but that was mainly because the post office withheld vital information. Paula Venables has quite a lot to answer for.
Who's that?
She was the former CEO.
Well, there is a government inquiry which is publishing in the summer, and we should wait for that inquiry before making any comment about Miss Reynolds or indeed anyone else. And I'm sure they have a presumption that they've done nothing wrong unless an inquiry finds otherwise. Listen, can I say this to you just finally? How are you now? Are you okay? Will you ever recover from this? Have you recovered from this?
I think with the support of my family and my immediate friends, I bounced back after about 4 or 5 years of the stigma and accepted the fact that this is what's happened. I can't do anything about it. Life must go on. It's only when I found
you well, Mohammed?
That remains to be seen. They say that they will compensate. No amount of money will compensate those colleagues of mine that have died, that have either committed suicide or have died with anguish. But to get the post office to, the only way the post office will realise its mistake is when it has to compensate financially, because it only understands the financial gains and losses, not human gains and losses.
Well, you sound like a gentleman, and it is a heartbreaking story, and your conviction has been quashed. You still have belief in the British justice system. Let's see what this government inquiry establishes in the summer, so that we, the public, can understand whether we can, at present, have faith in the post office that put you and 700 in total people through this. Thank you for talking to me, Mohammed. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Steve.
We'll pause there. We'll get the news at 11:45.
Listen on BBC Sounds. This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
With your 5 Live News, I'm Nick Hatton. Dominic Cummings has launched a blistering attack on his old boss Boris Johnson, questioning his competence and integrity. The former top advisor denied leaking text messages sent between Mr Johnson and businessman Sir James Dyson. Former sub-postmasters who've won a long legal fight to clear their names say the fight for justice against the post office and its use of a faulty IT system will continue. 39 men and women had their convictions for theft, fraud and false accounting overturned by the Court of Appeal. The Wales manager Ryan Giggs has been charged with assaulting 2 women at his home in Salford last November. He's also accused of coercive or controlling behaviour. The former Manchester United player said he would plead not guilty. And the reality TV star and transgender activist Caitlyn Jenner has said that she intends to run for governor of the US state of California. The state's current Democratic governor faces a recall bid over his handling of the pandemic. Now, an absolute howler from Arsenal goalkeeper Bernd Leno gifted Everton a crucial 1-0 win in their bid for a Champions League place. Leno fumbling a ball across the 6-yard box from Richarlison to give Everton the 3 points and to move them within 3 of the top 4. It's also Everton's first win away at Arsenal in 25 years. Here's their manager Carlo Ancelotti.
Yeah, unbelievable gift for our supporter. I think good performance, not top performance, but solid performance. We played solid, we were good defensively, we tried to play if it was possible, and we were lucky scoring a goal.
Well, that match, though, was preceded by a protest of over 1,000 Arsenal fans who'd gathered outside the Emirates to protest against owner Stan Kroenke's role in the failed European Super League. The Arsenal boss Mikel Arteta, though, says it wasn't the reason for his side's defeat.
No, I don't want to use any excuses towards what happened on the pitch.
Do you understand it happening?
Yeah, I understand, and they have the freedom to express themselves, so it's clear.
Owner Roman Abramovich and the Chelsea board say that they deeply regret the decision to join the European Super League, saying the owner and board understand that involving the club in such a proposal was a decision that we should not have taken, adding that the initial decision to join the Super League was taken because they did not want to risk falling behind their English and European rivals. However, they said they quickly recognised that their involvement risked damaging the club's reputation. Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp, meanwhile, says he's highly sceptical about the new Champions League format that's being introduced by UEFA. UEFA. The plans are set to be introduced in 2024 and include teams being increased from 26 to 32 with 4 more matches at the group stages.
The new Champions League is now not that you think, oh great, what's that? Let's just do that. They showed it to me, the whole idea, and I said I don't like it because there are 10 games instead of 6. I have no idea where we shall put them in.
The Welsh FA has confirmed that Rob Page will take charge of the national team at the Euros. He's stepped up in Ryan Giggs' absence over the past few months. In a statement today, Giggs has wished Page, his coaching staff and the Wales players every success at this summer's tournament. Defending champion Ronnie O'Sullivan is out of the World Snooker Championship. It's after a thrilling second-round match against Anthony McGill. O'Sullivan came into the final session 10-6 down in the first of 13 contest, then won 5 frames in a row to lead 11-10 before a nip-and-tuck final 4 frames saw McGill come through, although O'Sullivan, though, missed an opportunity in the decider.
Yeah, I'm just pleased that I was able to just focus on playing the match and trying to compete. You know, it is what it is. Reality for me is it's over, so there's not a lot I can do about it now. But it was all right. I tried to give him a game and make a bit of a game of it, you know.
Defending champions Exeter Chiefs demonstrated their title credentials by beating Premiership leaders Bristol and ending their 6-match winning run. 20 points to 12 the final score as Exeter closed the gap on the leaders to 8 points. In Super League, Hull FC maintained their unbeaten start to the season as they edged out Wakefield Trinity 20 points to 14, while Hull KR made it back-to-back victories with a 26-6 win at home to Leeds Rhinos. The Rovers head coach Tony Smith was happy with how his side never let their lead be in danger.
I'm pleased for the players. I thought we managed it pretty well today, not to allow Leeds to get back into the game. We could see they were a bit off their game, and we were able to keep them at bay, so that was good.
Elsewhere, Salford beat fellow strugglers Lee by 34 points to 8. And Britain's Jessica Gadarova marked her major international debut with all-around bronze at the European Artistic Gymnastics Championships in Switzerland.
BBC Sounds. Meet Sam, mother of 4, enjoys tinkering with cars, born and raised in the sleepy American suburbs. So how did she end up living with extremists in Syria?
I'm not a bad person. I'm not a monster.
And then there's this IT technician. He's in his 30s and goes on business trips to China. Why is he on the FBI's most wanted list? What started out as cybercrime is now tipping into threats of real-world violence. There's more than meets the eye. Listen to I'm Not a Monster, The Lazarus Heist, and more true crime podcasts on the BBC Sounds app.
BBC Radio 5 Live.
I listen every day.
I trust the presenters. Let's talk about some of the big business impact. The voice of the UK, Stephen Nolan. BBC Radio 5 Live.
Next, India has recorded more than 330,000 new coronavirus cases in the past 24 hours, and more than 2,000 people have died. The country's hospitals are buckling under the strain, with oxygen running short and beds in many hospitals completely full. Today, the UK added India to the red list, meaning only UK and Irish nationals and residents can fly from India to the UK, and they must then quarantine for 10 days on arrival. Aishri Singh is a musculoskeletal practitioner in London. Good evening to you, Aishri.
Hi, good evening, Paul. Thank you for having me here today.
It's Stephen, Aishri.
Hi, Stephen. Sorry,
hi,
apologies.
Not a problem. So you have family in India, and 2 of your uncles have died from coronavirus.
That's correct, yeah. And which is why you could say, I'm just not in my mind. Definitely I am in the Stephen Nolan show and calling you Paul, so apologies.
That's not a problem. No, not a problem. How worried are you about your family?
I just have no words. This is the time I had my COVID myself last year in December. We went through a worst phase in the UK. I was working, and I must say I was worried, but this is the time of my life I'll probably remember throughout my life. I've never been worried so much, where my mother is all by herself. My brother is in a different city, and I just fear that even if they just go out of the house for anything, even to get vaccinated, they can catch the virus. And if they catch the virus, there's nobody there. So it's the worst fear of my life.
And when you look at what's happening in India, that figure itself that I mentioned is startling. 330,000 new cases in the past 24 hours. Like, when I looked at that, I thought that was a mistake, actually.
Yeah, that's the reality. To be honest, I think there'll be even more numbers. Sometimes it's hard with such devastation, with such big population to get the exact number. So it's just dreadful. I mean, my phone beeps every second with some of the messages, with someone asking help for plasma therapy, for oxygen, for a drug, because you always have those common groups, my university friend group, my college group, my family group, and I don't get sleep these days because 4 o'clock my phone starts beeping. You can't just keep all your WhatsApp groups silent because they are your own ones, and there's always a pattern from last few days. You notice everybody will be asking you for this and that help, and suddenly there's like a silence, and then you wonder what happened with them, and then when you ask them what happened, and they would say no, it's just gone. So, and it's like deja vu now. I mean, they passed away. I mean, the person is dead. So, and it has happened so. I mean, for instance, in the last wave, when there was a death, one or two, it felt like okay, what has happened. But this time, it feels like life is nothing. It feels like so easy. And you see your own ones. I work in a hospital. I'm a healthcare professional. I see patient myself, but when you see your own ones, like seeing death so close with your own ones, it's just different. And I feel, and I'm sure this is a feeling for every Indian, everybody who has their family back home, they would be feeling equally helpless because when you're there, you can see your own ones. Even if the condition is bad, my mother maybe somewhere she's happy because she thinks I'm safe here. Condition is that bad there, but I can't. I would rather be there. Even if something happens to me, I don't care. I want to be there by her side. I don't want to miss any opportunity where I'm not there when my own ones needs me. So it's a and last Friday when when India was added in the red list, it was banned. I don't know, for some reason I just couldn't sleep that night. The fear of if that word, what if something happens and I have to fly and there's absolutely no way. So
what can be done to
yeah,
improve this quickly?
I think people really, really need to take this seriously. There has been a lot of mistakes. I mean, I understand it's about economy, it's about a lot of things, but I think this is a learning lesson. This is a crisis. This is something that's gone beyond the control, and everybody needs to realize, it's just not a virus. It's something that needs to be taken really serious. And I think we quite now it's not. We should have done it a long time back. Now it's a time where do or die. Yeah.
Actually, I hope you get to see your family soon, and I hope they're safe. And thank you for talking to me tonight. Listening to this, Frina Mehta in Leicester. Hello, Frina.
Hi, Stephen. Thank you for having me on your show.
Well, it's lovely to talk to you. Your mum, you must be very
Yeah.
concerned about. She went to India in March, and she can't get back home to you.
Yeah, that's correct. So actually, her father passed away a couple of months ago, but due to the COVID situation, she wasn't able to go. And then when India, actually, their cases went down, and that's when her mother started, she wasn't feeling very well either. That's when my mother had to fly out to India, and she's just been there since.
And are you on the telephone to her? And how is she describing what it's like to be living in India at the moment?
She's very stressed out. She's upset. We're doing anything and everything to try and get her back. She went in March. She was due back on 9th of April, and then we had the travel agent letting us know that the flight's been cancelled, and it's been postponed to 20th April. However, then we received another phone call on 18th of April to say that flight's been cancelled, and it will be rescheduled for 9th of May, and we still don't know whether that flight's going to be bringing her back or not. And India at the moment it's really dangerous out there.
Is she describing to you what it's like?
She is, and they've had 7 deaths in our own family. She's saying loads of healthy people. She's just hearing about deaths all of a sudden, and she said it's a really scary place to be at the moment.
Why can't she get home?
So India actually have a curfew, and they've actually suspended quite a lot of flights. So that's the reason she's not able to get home, and they keep cancelling flights. And now India have gone into red list. It's just difficult to get her back home.
I'm just wondering what you're going to do.
Yeah, I have tried contacting the British Embassy in India. To be honest, we've not had much luck. We are on the phone to the travel agents every day, even if we can book another ticket for her to get her down here. We're doing everything. She's doing PCR tests every other day at the moment, as you have to show the fit to fly certificate 72 hours prior. So that's another cost at hand as well.
And how old's your mum, Frida?
She's 54 years old. She went out there to see her mum, and now she's stranded over there, and she's an NHS worker herself. She works in John Lewis, and her job's on the line as well. So she's doing anything, and we're trying to do anything to bring her back.
Well, let's hope that she gets home soon. And thank you very much indeed. Thank you for sharing your story with me tonight. Thank you. OK, it's coming up to the midnight news now. After that, we'll return to the big political story that is going to dominate the headlines tomorrow. There's no doubt about that. Some of the newspapers calling it war between the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, and his former key advisor, Dominic Cummings, who has questioned Boris Johnson's integrity. We're picking up on that story after the news.
Voice of the UK. This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
BBC News at midnight. This is Victoria Bourne. Boris Johnson's former chief advisor Dominic Cummings has launched a blistering attack on his former boss, accusing the Prime Minister of lacking competence and integrity. Mr Cummings has denied being behind a damaging leak of text messages between Mr Johnson and the businessman Sir James Dyson. Tonight, a government minister said Mr Cummings was disgruntled and discredited. Our political correspondent Greg Dawson says it's a spectacular falling out between the two men.
This is a denial, but it's the fact that it's such an explosive denial and a personal attack on the Prime Minister and his office. And this was relating to James Dyson's staff coming to the UK to produce ventilators. The BBC reported on that and the information gleaned from those text messages. Today, Dominic Cummings has denied he was part of that leak. He said he does have text messages relating to Dyson's business with the government, but it's much more related to the ventilators and to COVID policy. It has nothing to do with the tax issues that the BBC has been reporting on earlier this week.
French anti-terrorism prosecutors are investigating the fatal stabbing of a police worker near Paris. The woman, who was 49 and had 2 children, was attacked at the entrance to her police station by a suspected Islamist who was then shot and killed. Hugh Schofield in Paris has the latest.
It's now known that he was a 37-year-old Tunisian national who came to France illegally in 2009 but had since acquired temporary residency papers. The investigation has been handed to the anti-terrorist branch of the prosecutor's office. This because of the choice of target, the method and the fact that the killer shouted Allahu Akbar as he attacked.
Japan is imposing what it's called a short, powerful lockdown on Tokyo and 3 other areas to try to control rising numbers of coronavirus infections. The Olympic Games are due to start in just 3 months. Schools will remain open, but restaurants, bars and many shops will close for 2 weeks. President Biden has closed the virtual climate summit by warning that commitments without actual cuts in emissions are just a lot of hot air. Yesterday, he and other national leaders made new pledges on carbon reduction targets. Mr. Biden said he now wanted to make those aspirations a reality by using new technologies.
I've asked the Secretary of Energy, my Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm, who you saw earlier, to speed the development of critical technologies to tackle the climate crisis. No single technology is the answer on its own, because every sector requires innovation to meet this moment.
More than 1,000 Arsenal supporters gathered outside the Emirates Stadium this evening to protest against the role the club played in the failed European Super League. The Gunners were one of the 12 founding members of the competition. The protesters called for the club owner Stan Kroenke to go. The weather, another chilly night in store for most of the UK, with clear spells for many. Some low clouds will develop in eastern Scotland and northeast England. BBC News is 3 minutes past midnight.
I'm Livy Haydock, and this is Gangster. In this podcast series, we tell the extraordinary story of Paul Massey, a gangland Mr. Big.
I got personal friends all over, and them personal friends wouldn't lie in bed at night if something happened to me.
His rise from the streets of Salford to the head of an organised crime group.
These people were the original Sopranos, that's no exaggeration.
A journey into a dangerous underworld where a code of silence reigns.
You work for us now. Any questions? Of course you don't have any questions.
Gangster. Listen on BBC Sounds.
Stephen Nolan on BBC Radio 5 Live.
So Dominic Cummings, remember him, the former top advisor to the Prime Minister, has denied leaking text messages sent between Mr Johnson and the businessman Sir James Dyson. But that's nearly old news by now. The big story is now what the papers are calling the war between Cummings and Johnson. The Independent, now Cummings attacks PM over leak accusations. The Guardian, Cummings hits back with astonishing attack on the Prime Minister. The Daily Mail, Dom's all out in war with the Prime Minister. We have been speaking tonight to the journalist Peter O'Borne.
Having come back tonight with his own statements, making massive allegations about the personal integrity of the British Prime Minister. I'm guessing that Cummings wants to destroy Johnson, and he thinks it's the material to do so.
More reaction to what Dominic Cummings has said in just a moment. And after judges have quashed the convictions of 39 former postmasters after the UK's most widespread miscarriage of justice, they were convicted of stealing money, with some in prison after the post office installed a flawed IT system in branches. We've heard tonight from Mohammed Rasool, who was one of those to have their conviction quashed today.
There were times when I actually started doubting myself. I know I haven't taken the money, but I must have done something wrong that had made the money disappear wherever it's gone. And that was the hardest bit to face.
Here's how you can get in touch tonight.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live. Call free 08085 909 693. Text 85058. Text will be charged at your standard message rate. Plus, see our privacy notice. bbc.co.uk/5live. Stephen Nolan on BBC Radio 5 Live.
Mohammed Shafiq's helping us look through the front pages today. Hello, Mohammed.
Hello, Stephen. Missed you.
Oh, well, thank you very much indeed. I was only off for a couple of weeks, for goodness sake, but I'm back to torture people. What a story in the front pages. Wow. Let's get our Paul Core, Greg Dawson, to set out the details.
On Tuesday, Stephen, the BBC reported a series of text exchanges between the Prime Minister and Sir James Dyson. Now, that was regarding UK tax policy, of whether James Dyson's employees would be affected if they left Singapore to work in the UK to produce ventilators. Now, this morning's papers were full of hints from unofficial sources within Downing Street that Dominic Cummings was behind that leak. However, he has released a statement that is about so much more than just leaked text messages. It's an explosive intervention from a man that Boris Johnson used to count on as one of his most trusted allies. He obviously denies having anything to do with the leak of those text messages to the BBC. He says he's willing to hand over his phone to the Cabinet Secretary for it to be inspected to prove the point. But he goes so much further. He not only denies that leak, he talks about one last November. Now, cast your mind back. This was actually in the end of October last year regarding a second national lockdown for November in England. Now, Dominic Cummings says that information was leaked, but he was cleared personally of being behind it. But he says that the Prime Minister was considering not having an inquiry into who the leaker was because one of the potential suspects was a close friend of his partner, Carrie Simons. Now, a senior government official says those allegations are completely false, while Downing Street say the Prime Minister has never interfered in any government leak inquiry. But there's even more. He talks about the renovation to the Downing Street flat. There's been reports for months that the Prime Minister's partner, Carrie Simons, wasn't happy with the decor in the flat above number 11 where she resides with the Prime Minister, that she got an interior designer in to revamp it. Mr. Cummings has accused the Prime Minister of planning to get donors to secretly pay for the renovations, claiming he warned him that it was unethical and possibly illegal. Now, we've got a statement from Downing Street on that point too. They say that government and ministers have acted in accordance with appropriate codes of conduct and electoral law, and that all gifts and benefits would be declared transparently at a later point. Now, earlier today, the government did say that the costs of the wider refurbishment have been met by the Prime Minister personally.
Well, Tim Montgomery is a former special advisor to Boris Johnson. Good evening to you, Tim.
Hi, good evening.
Nice to talk to you, sir. Mohammed Shafiq's still with us as well. Mohammed, you can join in whenever you like.
Sure.
Tim, so the man who Boris Johnson trusted and indeed reckoned was really, really good at selling stories, at coming up with simple, effective messages, is now the man coming up with as effective a message as he can make against him.
Yeah, it's a very significant moment, I think, in the life of the premiership of Boris Johnson. And I don't know whether you remember, Stephen, I was on your programme probably about a year ago. I actually left Downing Street in protest at the power that Dominic Cummings had. I warned the Prime Minister privately that he was allowing this individual far too much power. All of my warnings went unheeded, and so I don't take any pleasure in what's happened, but I'm afraid this was entirely predictable. Whatever role Dominic Cummings has played, I'm afraid, in his various chapters in public life, he has ended up falling out with people big time. And so I think there are some serious allegations to the Prime Minister to answer. I don't deny that. But at the same time, Dominic Cummings is no Mother Teresa, and I think a lot of the public will probably, if they drew up a list of people they did not admire in public life, Dominic Cummings, because of the whole Barnard Castle thing that we all remember, would be pretty high up on the list of people that the public don't respect. So Downing Street will take some comfort from the nature of the attacker, but that shouldn't mean that they are complacent about the attacks. Some very serious allegations being made, and Dominic Cummings says when he speaks before a parliamentary inquiry soon that he has the evidence to back up his allegations. So I think this is only the first instalment of a story that's going to rumble on for some time.
Could this topple a Prime Minister?
Yes, I think it's unlikely that it could, but I think the public, sadly, have a low view of most politicians. I think the idea of people attacking each other in this way doesn't really threaten the Prime Minister. You know, just a few weeks ago, we had, in quotes, bombshell, allegations that Alex Salmond was making against Nicola Sturgeon. And look at the opinion polls now. Nicola Sturgeon looks like she's going to do very, very well indeed in the Scottish election. So allegations in themselves don't hurt, but if there is a sense that somehow rules have been bent, taxpayers' money hasn't been used properly, if HMRC, for example, were to get involved in how money was used for this refurbishment of Downing Street, that's when I think things could start unravelling for the Prime Minister. And it's been pretty long-standing thing. The question that's hovered over the Westminster Village is most people do not think that the prime ministerial salary that Boris Johnson receives covers his outgoings. And how is that gap between his income and his outgoings bridged?
That's
speculation,
isn't it? That's speculation. There could be perfectly reasonable...
I was about to say there might be perfectly legitimate explanations for
exactly.
it. And I absolutely would say that. But this whole business of the refurbishment of number 10 Downing Street has led to the question of, well, how is the gap filled? He used to earn hundreds of thousands of pounds when he was a newspaper columnist. Has he squirreled money away and saved it? I don't think many people think that. I think they think there is a gap to be
Well, they
covered.
might not think
And
that,
that's
Tim,
where
but
the
they've no way of knowing. Like, you don't know what's in Boris Johnson's bank account, and so therefore, you know, is it not below the belt to speculate?
I think what I'm saying to you is that in the Westminster Village, this has been an open, live question for some time, and I'm telling your listeners, you know, where this story is, and this is where the journalistic inquiries are going to go. Now, let's say it again, and you're quite right to put us on a proper legal and ethical footing. It may well be that the Prime Minister has perfectly full explanations for how this gap, if this gap exists at all, is bridged. But I think that is what the questions are now going to be.
What has gone wrong? If we can actually rewind slightly here, what has gone wrong within that relationship between Boris Johnson and Cummings that it has got to this stage?
It's very simple, I think, is that the Prime Minister's big mistake wasn't necessarily to employ Dominic Cummings. I think Dominic Cummings, some of his insights into the way the British public was thinking helped deliver not just the victory for the Leave campaign in the Brexit referendum, but the parliamentary majority of 80 or so that the Prime Minister won at the end of 2019. So he's a considerably talented person. The mistake, I think, was to give Dominic Cummings, almost complete power in Downing Street. He's a good member of a team, but just as though he comes up with lots of brilliant ideas, he comes up with lots of ideas that you would want to be filtered, and it was never going to work. And then, of course, it ended in a very unhappy way, because it was always going to, I think, end in an unhappy way. Dominic Cummings was therefore basically expelled out of Downing Street unceremoniously, and he is now exacting his revenge, and he does.
Why
did
not,
have such,
Tim? Why not?
Well, I think the trigger was, the 24 hours ago. The focus was on number 10 blaming him potentially for the leak of the James Dyson text that Laura Kunsberg broke for the BBC on, I think, Wednesday morning.
Yeah, but they would have known. They would have known, Tim, that Cummings wouldn't have taken that plan down. They would have known they were poking the bear. Why did they do it?
Sometimes I think we think that the people in office are always very deliberate and strategic. Sometimes they're like all of us. They get angry, and I suspect there was a lot of anger in perhaps Boris's head, but also in the team's head. And sometimes you just want to punch back if you think that you've been damaged by someone. And I think there wasn't perhaps an awful lot of there was an absence of cool heads that caused them to brief the newspapers. But I would say at the same time, I suspect Dominic Cummings was always going to exact this revenge. So the timing of the revenge has been decided by the fact that number 10 briefed the papers in the way they did. But it was coming at some point anyway.
I was saying to Peter O'Born earlier that for me, I think where I think where some of the journalism will undoubtedly go here is that if this had have been just a more general criticism from Dominic Cummings, who, that statement at the end of his blog questioning the Prime Minister's integrity, then that might have been a 1-day stroke 2-day this weekend story. But the fact, Tim, that there are specific allegations, including that allegation about the refurbishment of Downing Street, that's what potentially, I just wonder if what your view is on this, gives this story a much longer shelf life, because there are specific questions, specific FOIs, there will be specific bills, specific numbers associated with that story alone.
Yeah, I agree with you absolutely. But just to reiterate the other side of this story, which you've been quite right to emphasise, the Prime Minister really may have completely comprehensive answers to these questions. But those questions, it doesn't matter what Dominic Cummings has alleged. For the reasons I stated, he's not someone that has the confidence of many people in the public or the parliamentary party. The allegations themselves don't matter. It is whether he brings forward proof of or serious allegations of misuse or misbehaviour, and Downing Street cannot answer those points. But, for a Tory party that is 2 weeks ahead of local elections, there'll be councillors. I was out with council candidates earlier this week. They're all flogging their guts out to be elected, and two men who supposedly have their interests at heart at the top of the Conservative Party have just made their life an awful lot more difficult. The timing of this, with the union at stake as well, because of what's going on in Scotland, it's deeply irresponsible.
Mohammed, just before we get your view, I should reflect what number 10 are saying. They're saying, in regards to the flat, at all times the government and ministers have acted in accordance with the appropriate codes of conduct and electoral law. Cabinet Office officials have been engaged and informed throughout, and official advice has been followed. All reportable donations are transparently declared and published, either by the Electoral Commission or the House of Commons Registrar, in line with the requirements set out in electoral law. Gifts and benefits received in a ministerial capacity are and will continue to be declared in transparency returns. Mohammed.
Well, I think there's a point which Tim referred to in regards to the mandatory register which the government publishes, and since 2015 over £400,000 has been donated to the Conservative Party from these lobbyists. I mean, they're not just giving money just because they happen to share the Conservative opinion. They want to have influence, and what we are seeing is a return to Tory sleaze. If you happen to be friends with the Prime Minister and a billionaire or millionaires, you get exclusive access to the Prime Minister by having his mobile number and being able to text him directly. But what about all those people who are waiting, during this pandemic to get a job, are unemployed, are looking, to make ends meet? How can they access the service of the Prime Minister and members of the government? And I just think it stinks. This is just a soap opera between a disgruntled former advisor who wants to dish the dirt on the Prime Minister, and obviously he's got lots of dirt.
So actually, Mohammed, are you saying the Cameron story is a bigger story than the Cummings story?
Yeah, I think the Cummings story is what Tim is suggesting is dishing the dirt to score a few cheap political points. We know what Dominic Cummings, he was ingrained in Downing Street over the last couple of years. He was responsible for lots of things that happened. Who can forget Barnaby Castle and everything? So there's not much respect and support for Dominic Cummings. But I think the wider issue is around how lobbyists have access, how former Prime Minister and the former ministers have access to current ministers, and clearing up the confusion around that. I think that's far more damaging than Dominic Cummings as a former employee says the Prime Minister has.
Do you, Tim?
I don't actually, partly because it's not edifying what the other DC, we've got two DCs, Donald Cummings and David Cameron here, it's not edifying what David Cameron did in a way, but he certainly did not act illegally. I think that needs to be said. And the bottom line is, of course, that government policy didn't change. For all of the frenetic lobbying that David Cameron did, government policy didn't change. And that, for listeners who are worried about the integrity of the British state, that is the fundamental thing. You had a former Prime Minister with enormous connectedness. He couldn't get changes in government policy. I think, that was a combination of the integrity of ministers and the integrity of our civil service. So, in a way, I think the David Cameron story is actually something that should reassure us. I think the jury on the allegations that Dominic Cummings making are still out. They may yet prove to be more potent. So no, I'm afraid I disagree slightly with Mohammed on that. I think it is. I think it's the Cummings thing that potentially is the more tricky thing.
Tim, of course, as well as what Dominic Cummings may or may not know about Boris Johnson, we should probably remind ourselves tonight that the Prime Minister, of course, will know the full behind-the-scenes story about Dominic Cummings and him testing his eyesight and him visiting the castle and all of that. So just how much info do they have on each other, and how hard might Boris Johnson fight back in all of this?
Well, he could fight back very hard, but, you know, the fact is...
Do you think that's likely? Will we see
I
leak
don't.
upon leak this weekend from either side?
Possibly, but the fact is, of course, is that if Dominic Cummings' reputation is further spoilt, it doesn't really matter that much, other than to Dominic Cummings and his family and his friends. This is an unequal contest, whereas if the reputation, the standing of the Prime Minister is spoilt, then that has huge implications for the governance of the country, potentially for the nature of the Brexit settlement as it as develops over the next few years. So, you know, it doesn't. You know, Dominic Cummings' reputation, perhaps unfairly, is already in the gutter because of Barnard Castle and stuff like that. I don't think he's got much to lose. The Prime Minister has enormous amount to lose. So getting in